Hi, I'm Scott Moss. I have a flock of Shetland sheep which produce a very nice fleece. I process the fleece. First I shear the sheep using a hand blade, something like big scissors. I then clean the fleece, which is called scouring. So this is the other half of the fleece that I showed just before, and it really stinks of lanolin and dirt and sheep sweat. Then I use my trusty pauser to push it down, but without agitating it, because if we agitate it, it'll turn the fleece into felt. Any fleece will have some very short fibers, little clumps of fiber. Still there'll be bits of grass and seeds in it, even after scouring. This is a comb, and the comb has these spikes. There is at least one Christian saint who was martyred with combs, these wool combs. The wool combs traditionally used were a great deal bigger than this, and wool combing was a skilled profession and had its own guild back in the Middle Ages and before the Industrial Revolution. In fact, wool combing was one of the last parts of the textile process to be mechanized. So you just take a bit, pull it off. Now there are some people who suggest that this should be oiled and wetted and all kinds of things. I find that's just not necessary. Just put bits of it on the static comb. Generally you take the tips, which are these curly bits, and have them come towards you. And with the tips towards you, you just put it onto the comb, and always taking the fluffy parts so that the tips are towards you. We have a nicely filled comb here, and with this particular design of comb I can turn it to the side, which actually makes the combing a lot easier. And I now then take the second comb, and starting just at the tips, I comb through it, and you'll see that I'm getting more and more of the wool onto the second comb. Okay, now once I've got it pretty well combed, I leave about equal amounts on the two combs, roughly. And I bring this back vertically. Now, for some purposes, if I wanted a really smooth yarn, I would pull this out into a kind of roving, but just now all I really want is to get the niles, tangles, and the very shortest fibers separated from the fleece I'm going to use for dyeing and spinning. This is the fleece I started with. You can see that it looks much whiter than what I started with, because even more of the bits have been left behind, and they're in this comb. So you can see that there are lots of niles, which are these little pills. The short fibers have been left, and also some of the bits of grass things. Now, in fact, there's still more fiber to be got from this, and I'll hold this back, and when I've got 3 or 4 of them, I'll comb these out. So you end up losing about 10% of the weight of the fleece from the combing process, but it gives you a much nicer, cleaner fleece that's easier to spin. Carded, this is a drum carder. So if you're doing any serious amount of carding, this is the device to have. Take a bit of the combed fleece, and you should be able to see through it where you're carding. If you leave little lumps in, you'll get lumps in the resulting bat, which is what you end up with on the carder. And this leaves you with the fleece with the fibers all parallel to one another. So this is the doffer, which goes in this groove, and you pull out the carded fleece, and this is now called a bat, B-A-T-T. And then we take it off. So I use this to help with. There we go. You can see all of the fibers are parallel to one another, and it's kind of fluffy. Now the next step would be to roll this up like that, and it's pretty much ready to spin with. It's good to have the fibers going in the direction that you're going to spin, so you just pull this out a bit like that, and you can see perhaps that the fibers are stretched out so that they're in the direction what is now called a rolag. The rolag is being turned into a roving. The more processing you do before you get to the spinning, then the easier it is to spin. Here we use natural dyes, vegetable dyes. They come from the roots of some plants. Sometimes they're chips of wood. Now this one has been dyed with Brazil wood. Well, it's not actually Brazil wood, it's a type of Brazil wood, because Brazil wood itself is now an endangered species. But there are several ways in which you can dye it. Now, this bat has been dyed with Brazil wood and a mordant called alum, which is similar to what you get in aluminium. And this has been mordanted with iron. Mordanting is the soaking of the fleece before it's dyed in a bath that has the mordant.